Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're the show that takes that big stack of sources, cuts through all the noise, and hopefully gives you the essential knowledge, the insights you need.
That's the goal.
And today, wow, we're diving into something that's still making waves, even months later. That intense, short conflict involving Iran, Israel, and, yes, the United States back in June 2025.
Yeah, it happened fast, but the impact, huge.
Exactly. We've gone through a lot of reports, Reuters, AP, the New York Times, Al Jazeera, the big names. We're trying to bring you a really solid understanding.
Synthesizing it all.
Our mission, really, is to pull out the critical moments, figure out who the key players were, and sort of unpack the implications. It's incredibly complex.
It really is.
We want you to get not just what happened, but, why it mattered, and maybe highlight some surprising things along the way.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's unpack this.
It's definitely a situation that needed this kind of deep dive. Things moved so quickly, so many players involved, each with their own calculations, and the information itself sometimes conflicting. Just shows why looking at all the sources is so important to get maybe a clearer view.
Couldn't agree more. So let's start at the beginning, the spark. How did this whole thing ignite?
Okay, so the sources point to Israeli airstrikes kicking things off.
Right, these weren't just small incidents, were they?
No, they seemed coordinated, targeting specific Iranian military sites and, crucially, nuclear facilities.
And Israel's reason?
Their stated reason was clear: preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons. That was the public justification for these first moves.
It's interesting, though, because while that was a stated goal, nuclear prevention, some sources, like the Times, noted the scale of these strikes.
Yeah, the precision, too. It felt like more than just, covert ops.
Exactly. It signaled maybe a shift in strategy,
Yeah.
more overt, which felt bold, given the tension already there, like Israel was sending a really loud message.
And Iran's reaction certainly sent a message back. Almost immediate, very forceful.
They didn't wait around.
Not at all. We saw missile attacks, drone attacks, launched by Iran straight at Israeli cities.
Haifa and Tel Aviv were named specifically in the reports, right?
Correct. Reuters, AP mentioned them, and that, of course, ups the stakes massively. Civilian centers involved. It gets very real, very fast.
It showed Iran could and would hit back directly.
Definitely. And they also put out that warning to the U.S., basically saying, if you intervene militarily, your forces here become legitimate targets.
Drawing a line in the sand early on,
Yeah.
direct message to Washington.
Very direct.
And timeline-wise, this initial back and forth, Israel and Iran, that was around June 19th to the 22nd.
That's what Reuters and AP reported, yeah.
Yeah.
A very intense 3-day window right at the start.
But things were about to get even more complicated.
Right, because just as we were all trying to process that, the U.S. stepped in, and that really changed the game, escalated things dramatically.
Under President Trump, the U.S. took direct military action, a huge turning point.
Oh, absolutely critical moment. The U.S. launched its own airstrikes, targeting 3 key Iranian nuclear sites.
Which ones were they again?
Fordow, that's the one deep underground. Isfahan, important for research. And Natanz, kind of the main enrichment facility.
So hitting the core of their program.
Seems like it. Defense analysts in some sources suggested it was a deliberate strategy aiming to seriously damage Iran's nuclear capabilities.
And President Trump's statement was quite strong.
Very strong. He announced these sites were, quote, entirely and utterly destroyed. Unprecedented direct U.S. action in a conflict like this.
But crucially, verification.
Ah, yes. That's key. AP and the New York Times pointed out that independent confirmation of how much damage was actually done, that wasn't available right away.
So the claim was made, but the full picture was murky.
Exactly.
And the U.S. justification mirrored Israel's, essentially, preventing Iran from getting the bomb.
That was the official line. But, and it's really important we note this, Iran and some international observers immediately pushed back.
Disputed that claim, suggested maybe other motives.
Right. We're just reporting what the sources say here, presenting the different viewpoints without taking sides.
Absolutely. And this U.S. involvement, this was also around June 21st, 22nd. Overlapping with the Iran-Israel exchanges.
Yes, according to AP and the Times, it was incredibly dynamic. Things were happening very, very quickly.
Wow. So how did Iran react to the U.S. strike specifically? It must have been intense.
Oh, it was. Very stern response. Iranian state media, statements cited by Reuters and AP, they condemned the U.S. actions, called it a violation of sovereignty.
Not just diplomatic anger, then.
No, it was framed as like a direct assault on their country, a breach of international law, really raised the stakes on the world stage.
And they backed it up with warnings.
They did. Iran's military leadership said point blank that American military assets anywhere in the region were now fair game, legitimate targets.
That's a significant threat.
Huge. It wasn't just talk. It signaled they were ready to widen the conflict. They doubled down, saying Iran kept all options open for retaliation. A very defiant stance from Tehran.
And meanwhile, the attacks on Israel continued.
Yes. Amidst all this, the missile attacks from Iran kept coming towards Israeli territory. Sources mention civilian casualties, obviously causing huge alarm and disruption in Israel.
So even with the U.S. involved, Iran didn't stop hitting Israel directly.
It shows a kind of multi-layered response, hitting back at Israel while also warning the U.S.
Which brings us to the question, what was the immediate impact? Human cost, geopolitical fallout.
That's critical. The immediate impact was, well, grim. Sources across the board reported a deepening humanitarian situation, people displaced, immense anxiety in both countries.
The psychological aspect must have been immense.
Living under constant threat.
Yeah.
Plus the damage to infrastructure, a harsh reality. But interestingly, even as this was happening, de-escalation efforts started almost as fast as things had escalated.
Right, because on June 23rd, President Trump announced something quite major.
He did. According to Reuters, he announced a complete and total ceasefire between Israel and Iran. This was after about 12 days of really intense fighting.
A ceasefire, how did that come about?
Well, reports suggest Qatari mediation was key, playing that crucial, often quiet role behind the scenes to get Iran to agree.
Interesting. The diplomatic track running parallel.
Always is. And U.S. officials indicated Israel was also on board, but, and this is a big but, it was contingent on Iran stopping all attacks.
A fragile agreement then. Seemed like a potential pause, at least.
A glimmer of hope, maybe,
Yep.
But, and this is where it gets complicated again.
What does this mean for the ceasefire actually holding? Because the ink was barely dry.
Exactly. The New York Times reported this crucial and, yeah, pretty disheartening detail. Hours after the ceasefire was declared, June 24th, reports started coming in.
Violations.
Yes, both sides accusing each other of breaking the truce. Reports of more missile launches, more airstrikes.
No. So much for complete and total.
It just highlighted the incredible lack of trust, the deep-seated conflict, showed how hard peace efforts are when tensions are that high and there's zero confidence between sides. Any optimism faded pretty fast.
That is disheartening, because even with that brief ceasefire attempt, the consequences were still mounting. Significant casualties, damage on both sides.
Deep scars, even from a short conflict.
And the sources detailed that damage.
It did. Israeli strikes reportedly hit parts of Iran's military leadership hard, and the nuclear infrastructure aligning with their stated aims. Reuters and AP mentioned precision targeting of command centers, research spots, a real effort to degrade Iran's capabilities.
And on the other side,
Iranian missile attacks caused civilian deaths, damaged Israeli cities. Reuters described the impact in Haifa. Al Jazeera detailed humanitarian challenges in Iran. Just a grim picture of the human cost for ordinary people.
which brings us back to the motivations. Still debated.
Very much so. U.S. and Israel stuck to the nuclear prevention line. But sources like Al Jazeera, other commentators, they noted the ongoing debate. Were there broader geopolitical goals?
Like what? A struggle for regional influence.
Exactly. Regional hegemony. Each side perhaps using this to assert dominance, reshape the power balance, maybe less about just one issue, more about the future of the Middle East. Again, important to see all these perspectives. We're just laying out what the sources presented.
Right, staying impartial. And what's fascinating, too, is the ripple effect, the wider impact.
Oh, immediate and profound. Fears of a much bigger regional war shot up. Concerns global powers could get dragged in. Serious destabilization across the Middle East.
You could feel that tension globally.
Absolutely. Emergency meetings in Gulf states, Europe. Everyone wary of this spark, igniting other conflicts. It just showed how interconnected, how volatile the region is. One flashpoint affects everything.
And the reaction from Iran towards the U.S. and Israel's actions.
Strong condemnation from Iranian leaders, as you'd expect. But also serious warnings, long-term consequences for regional security, prolonged instability, undermining future diplomacy.
Framing it as something that could echo for years.
Yes. Potentially changing strategic alignments, deepening grievances, not just about those 12 days.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. A rapid escalation, starting with Israeli strikes, Iran hitting back hard, then direct U.S. military involvement, all packed into a few days in June 2025.
Leading to that very fragile ceasefire, brokered under pressure, but violated almost instantly.
And the cost was real. Casualties, damage on both sides. A clear reminder of the devastation.
And crucially, the real motivations, the long-term fallout, still very much debated by experts and officials worldwide.
If you connect this to the bigger picture.
It just underlines the huge challenges in such a volatile region, deep history, big geopolitical goals. It's never just about one thing.
Absolutely. Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe for you, the listener. Given how quickly that ceasefire broke down, what does it tell us about the challenges of making peace stick when you have these deep geopolitical rivalries and disputed claims?
And maybe, how do these short, sharp conflicts actually change the long-term security picture in a region like the Middle East?
Yeah, definitely a lot to think about long after the headlines fade.